You've worked hard. You've saved diligently. You've hit that $500,000 mark. And yet, somehow, it still doesn't feel like enough. There's a quiet frustration lurking beneath every bank statement, a subtle tension you can't name, and most of the time you just shrug it off. But here's the truth nobody tells you. It's not about the money. It's about the system you're trapped in, and until you see it, you will never feel wealthy, no matter how many zeros appear in your accounts. Most people assume feeling rich comes from reaching a number, from a salary, a portfolio, or a home that finally feels like a milestone. They chase that figure obsessively, thinking that crossing thresholds will finally unlock contentment. But the moment you reach one milestone, the system quietly shifts the goalposts. The 500K you thought would bring peace now feels temporary. You feel the pressure to earn more, save more, protect more. And in that invisible pressure, satisfaction never arrives. Here's the twist few notice. The system isn't broken, and you aren't failing. This is by design. Banks, investment platforms, even our own habits are wired to reward stability while keeping desire alive. Stability in income, spending, and risk makes the world run smoothly, but it also keeps most people perpetually restless, even when they've achieved what should feel like financial freedom. The hidden rule is simple. The brain interprets stability as safety, but safety is not the same as wealth. Feeling rich requires a mental threshold few people cross because society teaches us to measure ourselves externally, not internally. Think about it. In 5 years, where will you be if your thinking hasn't shifted? Will 500K still feel like enough? Or will it simply feel like another checkpoint on a treadmill that never ends? That question alone is worth pausing for a moment. Because the difference between feeling rich and feeling empty isn't the number. It's whether you understand the invisible rules shaping your perception of money and security. By the end of this video, you'll understand the hidden rule that keeps most people feeling poor even when their bank accounts suggest otherwise. You'll see why quiet decisions, how you perceive risk, how you measure progress, how you internalize stability, determine whether you feel wealthy or trapped. And more importantly, you'll learn how to shift your thinking so that 500K, or even $500,000 more, finally translates into calm confidence, not subtle anxiety. And here's what to keep in mind as we start. The system is subtle, but the consequences are long-term. Miss this, and 10 years from now, your financial life may be larger, but your sense of wealth remains unchanged. Stick with me, because the truth most people never notice is hiding in plain sight. The first invisible rule you need to understand is this. Stability is seductive, but it limits perception. Most people assume that feeling safe and predictable is the same as feeling wealthy. You set up a routine, steady income, disciplined savings, careful investments. You avoid risk, stick to what you know, and celebrate small victories like paying off debt or watching your portfolio grow incrementally. And yet, even at 500K, the sense of enough never arrives. Why? Because the mind equates stability with safety, but safety is not the same as richness. When you stay within the bounds of predictability, you condition yourself to expect that the next milestone will finally deliver satisfaction. You think, once I hit 500K, I'll finally relax. But the system quietly recalibrates your internal ruler. Suddenly, 500K seems like a checkpoint rather than a destination. Your brain is wired to notice what's missing, not what you already have. Consider this quietly. People who appear calm, wealthy, or satisfied aren't just lucky. They've learned to separate stability from fulfillment. They understand that growth and comfort exist on different tracks. Stability protects your finances, but it also dulls the perception of wealth if you never intentionally measure richness in ways beyond numbers. Here's a simple system rule. True wealth is defined internally, not externally. If your sense of abundance depends on the next financial milestone, the feeling of richness will always be one step ahead of your reality. You can have 500K, 1 million, or 5 million, but without the mental framework to internalize it, it will always feel like just enough to keep running, never enough to rest. Long-term consequences of ignoring this are subtle but profound. In 10 years, someone with the same financial portfolio could either feel content and confident or chronically restless and underfulfilled. The difference isn't the dollars, it's the lens they use to perceive them. And here's the first rehook. The next hidden layer is even quieter. While stability hijacks your perception of wealth, the system also uses subtle risk cues to keep desire alive. Most people never notice how deeply this affects their decisions, yet it shapes decades of their financial life. The second hidden rule is subtle, almost invisible. Your perception of wealth is dictated by comparison, not accumulation. It's easy to assume that if your net worth hits 500K, you should finally feel rich. But the system has trained you to measure yourself against others, against headlines, against social media snapshots of success. Your brain naturally scans for gaps, for the lives that appear fuller, faster, bigger. And in doing so, it constantly undermines your own sense of progress. Even quietly, comparison shapes behavior. You may not consciously notice it, but it determines the investments you chase, the lifestyle choices you justify, the stress you accept as normal. That new car, the upgraded home office, even the vacation that everyone else is taking, these aren't just expenses, they're signals. Each one subtly tells your brain, you're behind, you're missing something, you're not wealthy enough yet. Consider someone with 500K invested and disciplined spending. On paper, they're financially secure, even advantaged. But if they're measuring themselves against peers with higher salaries or faster accumulation, that sense of security never translates into a feeling of wealth. You start chasing growth obsessively, not because you need it, but because the system nudges your mind to chase the perception of richness. Here's the system rule. Wealth is a measure of autonomy, not appearance. If your feeling of richness depends on what others have, your mind will always find someone ahead. Money becomes a moving target, satisfaction a mirage, and 500K feels like a pit stop instead of a destination. The long-term consequence is quiet but profound. 10 years from now, your account may have doubled, but your sense of abundance may have barely shifted. You'll have more, but never feel it fully, because your internal measurement system hasn't changed. Rehook. The next layer goes even deeper. Comparison isn't just external, it's internal too. Your own expectations, shaped by stability addiction, quietly tighten around you, creating a cage disguised as security. Understanding this next rule is where true transformation begins. Imagine this. A man named David. By most standards, he's done it. He has 500K in investments, a steady career, and a lifestyle that most people would envy. Yet, every month, he feels a familiar tension, like running on a treadmill that never stops. He checks his accounts obsessively, compares himself quietly to peers, and postpones satisfaction. Vacations are rare, purchases deliberate, celebrations muted. On the surface, everything is stable. Beneath it, he feels restless. David's story isn't unique. It's the system quietly at work. Stability gives him safety, but it also constrains his perception. He's trapped in a loop of quiet fear. Fear of falling behind, fear of losing momentum, fear of feeling less than despite his accomplishments. Each milestone he reaches is simply another checkpoint on a treadmill. 500K isn't a destination, it's just a mark along an invisible line that keeps shifting. Then one day, he notices a pattern. Every time he feels tense, it's tied to comparisons. What friends have, what colleagues earn, what he imagined he would achieve by now. The realization is subtle, but profound. The system has trained him to chase numbers while ignoring the internal signals that actually define richness. He starts experimenting differently, tracking not just growth, but satisfaction, autonomy, and calm. He sets small boundaries, allows himself quiet wins, and acknowledges progress without external validation. Slowly, the tension eases. 500K begins to feel substantial, not because it changed, but because his perception did. Here's the system rule embedded in the story. Richness is experienced, not earned. The bank accounts and milestones matter, but they are meaningless without the internal lens to appreciate them. Stability can protect you from loss, but it will never make you feel wealthy if your mind is trapped in comparison, anticipation, and quiet fear. Rehook. And this is where most people get it wrong. They stop at awareness. They understand stability hides the feeling of wealth, but never confront the next invisible layer, how subtle choices, daily habits, and internal rules quietly govern whether 500K ever feels like freedom or just a checkpoint. What David realized next is the shift that can take anyone from restless to truly rich, and that's exactly what we'll explore in the next section. The third hidden rule is quiet but powerful. The comfort of stability can quietly sabotage your perception of abundance. Most people reach 500K and breathe a sigh of relief. They've built systems, routines, and safety nets. And yet, the very structures that protect them, predictable income, careful budgeting, minimal risk, also reinforces a subtle ceiling on their emotional experience of wealth. Here's how it works. Stability teaches the brain to value safety over satisfaction. You know you're secure. That's enough to avoid panic. But security alone does not create joy, confidence, or the feeling of richness. You become habituated to the comfort zone. Vacations are planned cautiously. Purchases are justified rationally. Celebrations are measured. The mind learns to tolerate restraint and call it contentment, but it's a trained tolerance, not genuine abundance. Think of it like this. A person can climb mountains safely using a fixed rope path. They will reach high altitudes, see great views, but they will never experience the thrill of exploring untouched terrain. Stability keeps you on the rope, safe from falls, but it also limits the emotional and psychological rewards of uncharted growth. System rule. Richness is amplified by intentional risk, not just protected by stability. Without deliberate experiences or choices that expand perception, your 500K feels like a checkpoint instead of a milestone. The mind measures richness not by account balances, but by contrast between comfort and challenge, fear and mastery, expectation and fulfillment. The long-term consequence is subtle but cumulative. Year after year, you may grow wealth in numbers, but remain underwhelmed internally. Compounding works for dollars, but if your mind is trapped in habitual stability, satisfaction does not compound. It plateaus. You have more, but you feel the same. Rehook. And here's the next quiet truth. The real transformation doesn't come from more money or even calculated risk. It comes from recognizing the invisible rules that shape perception itself, the internal frameworks that decide whether 500K ever feels like freedom or remains just another checkpoint. In the next segment, we'll reveal the fourth hidden mechanism that unlocks that perception, and it's far simpler than most think. The fourth hidden rule is the quietest of all. Your definition of wealth is shaped by habits, not income. Most people assume that once they hit 500K, life will feel different. Yet, what they don't see is that habits, daily patterns of thought, spending, and reflection determine whether that money translates into richness. Without adjusting these, financial milestones change nothing internally. Look closely. Someone can earn 500K, save diligently, and live comfortably, yet still feel constrained. Why? Because habits form the lens through which the brain interprets abundance. If every day is measured in obligations, comparisons, and deferred satisfaction, the mind never pauses long enough to register fullness. Stability alone creates a calm exterior, but not a deep sense of richness. Here's a practical example. Imagine two people, both with identical net worths. One spends each week intentionally, celebrating small wins, reviewing progress privately, appreciating the choices that money enables. The other simply follows routines, invests automatically, and postpones satisfaction for the next milestone. The first person feels wealthy and secure. The second does not. Habits, not dollars, dictate perception. System rule. Wealth is experienced through conscious practice, not accumulation. Quiet rituals, tracking progress, reflecting on achievements, permitting oneself to enjoy success, amplify the feeling of richness. Ignoring these habits means 500K is just a number. Integrating them converts milestones into meaningful, internalized experiences. Long-term consequence. Over 10 or 20 years, the compounding of habits creates a stark divide. Two people with similar balances can live radically different financial lives, one fulfilled, one perpetually chasing the next threshold. This is why most never feel rich even when the numbers suggest they should. Rehook. And this is the subtle bridge to transformation. Once you understand that habits, perception, and mental framing governs your sense of wealth, the path from 500K to truly feeling rich becomes clear. Next, in the outro, we'll tie all 4 hidden rules together and reveal how to shift your internal framework so that financial stability finally translates into genuine richness. Now, let's step back and see the full picture. 500K, or any milestone, isn't inherently liberating. Feeling rich doesn't come from numbers. It comes from understanding the invisible rules shaping perception, stability versus satisfaction, comparison traps, comfort ceilings, and the compounding power of habits. Each of these quietly decides whether money feels like freedom or just another checkpoint. Imagine yourself 10 years from now. If nothing changes, the account grows, but the restlessness remains. If you apply these principles, recognizing the subtle influence of stability, consciously reframing comparison, intentionally challenging comfort, and cultivating habits that reinforce perception, then wealth begins to feel as real as the numbers in your portfolio. 500K starts to feel substantial. 1 million begins to feel meaningful, and you finally gain the calm, strategic confidence that most people never experience. This is the shift the system rarely teaches. Financial life isn't built solely by earning or saving. It's built by thinking differently, perceiving differently, and choosing daily practices that reinforce richness. Your brain can adapt, just like your bank account grows, but only if you consciously guide it. So here's the quiet takeaway. Measure your wealth internally, not externally. Make small but consistent habit shifts. Observe how perception changes faster than income. And stay aware. There's always a hidden threshold ahead, waiting for those who understand the rules. The next step isn't chasing more. It's seeing what you already have, fully, with a new lens. Start with one small habit today. Reflect, adjust, and notice how 500K begins to feel like the first true milestone of a life that finally feels wealthy.